Welcome to History Lullaby. Tonight, we're not heading into battle or surviving the horrors of industrial alleyways. Instead, we find ourselves in the more refined, yet still somewhat perilous world of Georgian London, where illness is almost fashionable. Here, treatment comes in elegant glass vials, and suffering is, well, considered tasteful so long as it doesn't interrupt the dinner conversation. Picture this. You are pale, well-dressed, and politely unwell. The doctors offer vague diagnoses, blaming your nerves, bile, or just your nature. But don't worry, there's a remedy, an exquisite tincture. Just a few drops, taken regularly, and perhaps forever. As we descend into this slow spiral of sweetened poison, polite dismissal, and the warm haze of forgetting, I've got a favor to ask. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. It's always interesting to see where all my fellow history lovers are listening from. Now, let's settle in and enjoy these stories. Lie back, get comfortable, and prepare for tonight's journey into the world of Georgian health and a bit of suffering served with class. Let's begin. You're 27, the wife of a solicitor, and recently recovered from what the doctor called a difficult confinement. The child did not live. You did, although you're not entirely certain why. You've been bleeding off and on ever since. Not dangerously, just inconveniently. You sleep in the day and lie awake at night. You cry sometimes for no clear reason. You feel cold when it's warm and too warm when it's cold. There is nothing visibly wrong with you, which in Georgian London means no one is quite sure how to help. You live in a neat little terrace house just off Bedford Row. The street is quiet, the neighbors dull, and the shutters always rattling with wind that doesn't appear on anyone else's street. There is a maid, barely 16, who carries hot bricks to your bed when you shiver. She doesn't make eye contact. Your husband does occasionally over the top of the paper at dinner when he remembers. He is not unkind. He simply has things to attend to. Court filings, retainers, the burden of being publicly competent. You used to be presentable, sharp even. You played the harpsichord with enough skill to warrant applause in polite company. You attended dinner parties. You remembered names. Now your fingers tremble when you button your cuffs. Your letters go half-finished. You stare at window glass and forget what you meant to do. People say things like, "It's the grief," or "She's delicate." They mean, well, you wish they wouldn't. The physician has been visiting twice a week since the birth. A private man with a mild limp and a breath that smells faintly of clothes. He taps your wrist, glances in your eyes, and asks the same 3 questions in the same patient tone. Do you sleep through the night? Have you taken nourishment? Any thoughts of an unnatural kind? You answer, not quite some. Number. He nods, scribbles a few lines in his ledger, and tells you to take more broth. Then he closes the book as if that's the end of it. Last week, he suggested leeches. You said yes. You said yes to everything he's ever recommended. And still, you feel thin, like the air moves through you instead of around you. The pain is not sharp, but it lingers low in the back, behind the ribs, or sometimes just behind the eyes. You've tried putting words to it, ache, pressure, emptiness, but none of them seem quite right. It is not a pain that wounds. It is a pain that hovers, familiar as your own breath. You know it will follow you into the next room. Today, the doctor doesn't ask questions. He walks in, nods toward the window, and makes a small comment about the wind. You murmur agreement. He sits, looks you over, and says, "You're not improving." His tone is kind, but his expression is not particularly moved. "You ought to sleep more," he says. It's the nerves, or the strain, or a failure of tone in the blood. He doesn't sound confident, but you've stopped expecting confidence. He opens his satchel. You watch him uncap a small ink bottle, dip his pen, and write out a label with your name and the number 25. Then he tears the page, folds it, and seals it with a flick of his fingers. "Laudanum," he says, handing it to you. "Take it sparingly." The apothecary sends it. The next morning, a pale boy in a soot-streaked apron knocks on the tradesman's door behind the house, mutters your surname, and places a small wrapped parcel in the maid's hand. You watch from the stairs. The boy does not look up. He vanishes without waiting for acknowledgement. You carry the parcel up to your room like it might bleed if jostled. You sit on the edge of your bed to unwrap it. The glass is dark brown and cool to the touch. The label is written in your doctor's careful hand. Mrs. L, 25 drops. Beneath that, a smaller note. As needed, you turn it over. No ingredients. No further explanation. You know laudanum by reputation. The way one knows of absinthe or arsenic. Foreign. Fascinating. And just slightly improper. There's a faint smell of wine and iron when you ease the stopper loose. You take exactly 25 drops. The liquid stains the spoon, but doesn't cling. You mix it into a lukewarm cup of tea and sip it without ceremony. It is bitter, almost medicinal, with a sweetness that catches at the back of the throat. You set the cup down. You wait. It begins behind the eyes. The tightness unwinds. The weight in your chest does not lift exactly, but it seems farther away now, like something happening in another room. Your arms go warm. The pain, or the memory of it, softens, dissolves, recedes. You lie back without meaning to. The pillow is cool. The sheets smell of starch and sleep. Your eyes close on their own. You wake several hours later and feel for the first time in weeks as though you've returned to something. The ache is still there, but subdued. The air in the room is less sharp. You remember your own name without effort. The second cup of tea tastes like tea again. You even finish a letter you started last week. When your husband returns, he remarks that your color has improved. You nod, say thank you, and excuse yourself to bed early. He seems relieved. You do not take the drops immediately the next day. You want to prove to yourself that you don't need them. You last until afternoon, then measure out another 25 with a slightly steadier hand. It works again. It always works. The pain recedes. The silence grows less heavy, and your body feels briefly like a place you might wish to live in. The doctor returns and asks how you're feeling. You say, much improved. He smiles, writes something illegible in his ledger, and says, I told you it would help. You thank him. He does not ask if you've been following the dosage exactly. You do not volunteer the fact that you've begun to take it in the mornings. Now, not every morning, of course, just the difficult ones, the foggy ones. The ones when the light feels too sharp and the air presses too heavily on your chest. The maid changes your linens twice a week. She no longer glances nervously at the red smudges near the pillow. You find your appetite returning, though not for food. You eat little, but you no longer dread the feeling of sitting up in your dressing gown. You even consider attending church. You mention this aloud, and your husband praises the idea. He kisses your hand at dinner. You feel nothing, but it is something at least to be congratulated. 2 weeks pass. The bottle is half empty. You only notice because it's heavier on one side when you lift it, like something uneven has shifted inside. You hold it up to the light, not out of suspicion, but curiosity, and see the amber liquid sloshing sluggishly against the glass. You are not alarmed. You've been careful. You've taken only what was needed. Some days, not even that. But the ache is returning. Not all at once. Not in a way you can point to, but slowly, like water seeping back into a sponge. You wake with a dull pressure in your hips. You sit longer at the breakfast table, your hands idle, your spoon forgotten beside cooling tea. The maid clears the tray and asks if you'd like her to wear the sheets. You nod, though you don't understand the question. It takes you several seconds to remember what day at Island. You take 25 drops, then 5 more, just to be sure. The pain doesn't go away, not completely, but it dulls again. Enough to keep the windows from pressing inward. Enough to quiet the part of your mind that keeps whispering unfinished thoughts. You do not call it more than what at Island. You do not call it indulgence. You are simply managing your condition. The next morning, you wake to a strange buzzing behind your eyes. It fades by mid-morning, but you take 30 drops anyway just to stay ahead of it. You tell yourself, it's only temporary. You're still healing after all, still recovering. The doctor said it might take months, or years, or longer. You no longer remember his exact phrasing, but you remember the tone. Patient, unconcerned, mildly patronizing. You cling to it like doctrine. By the end of the week, you stop measuring, not because you've given up, but because you've become efficient. You tilt the bottle with the steadiness of someone doing embroidery. The amount is approximate, but you've grown familiar with the feeling. The moment just before the warmth begins, the flicker of weightlessness behind the sternum, you know what's required to reach it. You stop counting. Some days you forget you've taken it at all. You find yourself blinking in the drawing room, uncertain how long you've been staring at the same unlit fire. You pick up a novel and discover the page is dog-eared in a place you don't remember reaching. When your husband speaks to you, his voice arrives as if through thick cloth. You respond vaguely. You hope he doesn't notice. If he does, he says nothing. Once you miss a dose entirely, it's accidental. The bottle slips behind the stack of folded linens on your nightstand, and by the time you think to look for it, your hands are shaking. Not visibly, not enough to alarm the maid, but enough that you struggle to button the back of your dress. You go without it through breakfast. Your mouth feels dry. The sunlight through the shutters has a sharpness to it that makes your eyes water. By midday, your chest is tight. You feel as though you've been holding your breath for hours. When you find the bottle again, you drink directly from it. Not much, just enough to make the air soften around the edges. It hits harder when you take it that way, but it doesn't last as long. You take more an hour later. You sleep most of the afternoon. No one mentions it. That night at dinner, you excuse yourself early. Your husband nods. You're grateful for the silence. You sit at your vanity and stare at your own reflection for a long time. There are creases at the corners of your mouth you hadn't noticed before. Your eyes look too dark. You blink, and for a moment, the face looking back at you seems faintly amused. The bottle is nearly empty. You know you ought to mention it. Refill requests are usually sent through your husband or by quiet note left for the physician. There's a procedure, a civility. But something about the request feels accusatory. It implies excess. It implies you've taken more than was needed, and you haven't. You've only done what was required. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. You write the note yourself. You fold it once, seal it in an envelope, and hand it directly to the maid before breakfast. You tell her to deliver it to the apothecary. You do not involve your husband. You tell yourself it's to spare him the inconvenience. The letter is signed with your full name carefully. There is nothing improper about it. You worry the bottle will not be replaced. You think briefly that perhaps the doctor will refuse, will remind you of the dosage, will scold you for running out too soon. You brace for it. You rehearse a defense, but no response comes. That afternoon, a small parcel arrives wrapped in oil paper and twine. The maid sets it on the sideboard without comment. You wait until she leaves to open it. It's identical. Same label, same glass, same weight in the hand. You feel something uncoil in your chest. Not joy, not even relief. Just the quiet easing of a knot you hadn't realized was there. You open the new bottle and return the old one to the drawer. It clinks against the tin of pastilles and the unused spool of thread. You mean to dispose of it later. You never do. The next week passes in haze. You don't feel worse. You don't feel much at all. The days are manageable so long as you begin them properly. 30 drops in the morning, perhaps a bit more by mid-afternoon, especially if you're expected to entertain callers. You still get dressed. You still brush your hair. You still say good morning when your husband emerges from his study. It all feels routine, mechanical, but no one seems to notice. You receive a letter from your sister, something about her eldest learning to ride. You read it twice before realizing you've retained none of it. You fold it carefully and place it with the others. You'll respond eventually. You visit the garden once. The day is clear, the hedges trimmed, the paving stones swept free of leaves. You sit on the bench nearest the lilac bush and close your eyes. The breeze lifts your hair slightly. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks. You can hear your maid's footsteps on the gravel behind you, but you don't turn. You tell yourself you'll stay outside for an hour. You last 12 minutes. The walk back to the house feels longer than it should. That evening, you refill your tea and add the drops without counting. The bottle tilts familiarly in your hand, like a glass you've held too often to question. You swirl the liquid into the cup and drink it while it's still warm. You feel your muscles loosen one by one. The ache in your back becomes distant. The creak of the floorboards quiets. The edges of your thoughts grow round and untroubling. You rest your head against the back of the chair and feel briefly like someone else might be doing the thinking for you. You wake in the same chair several hours later. It's dark outside. A candle is burned halfway down beside you. Your fingers are stiff. You can't remember what you were reading or if you were reading at all. You rise slowly, steady yourself against the armrest, and walk to the wash basin without turning up the lamp. You do not look in the mirror. In the morning, you're careful. You measure 25 drops exactly. You tell yourself it is a return to discipline, that you will space your doses more deliberately, that you've simply been tired, and the weather has been poor, and the house too quiet. You sip your tea with a forced slowness. It doesn't work as well. Your headache lingers. You consider taking more. You don't. You wait. An hour later, you add another 10 quietly. When the doctor arrives that afternoon, you feel composed. You sit on the settee in your afternoon gown. You ask after his wife, and he seems pleased by the question. He remarks that you look well. You thank him. He asks if the Lord has helped. You say yes. He does not inquire further. He does not ask how often you've taken it, or when you last needed it. He does not inspect the bottle. He jots something down in his ledger and leaves. You finish the last few drops 3 days later. You don't realize it until you tilt the bottle and nothing comes out. A single smear clings to the inside of the glass, but it will not pour. You tap the side. You scrape at the neck with a spoon. You almost lick the rim, but you stop yourself. You sit back. You fold your hands. You tell yourself, this is a good thing. A pause, a moment to regain balance. That evening, you do not sleep. You lie awake with your eyes closed, feeling every wrinkle in the linen beneath you. Your spine aches, your stomach knots. The mattress creaks every time you breathe. You feel strangely aware of your skin, like you're wearing something that doesn't fit quite right. At some point, you fall into a shallow, twitching doze. You wake 3 times before morning, and each time swear it must be later than at Island. You wait until the maid has left the house to run errands. Then you sit at your writing desk, take out a sheet of paper, and dip your pen without hesitation. The note is brief. You send it with a coin. The parcel arrives that evening. This time, you take the bottle from the maid's tray without a word. You unwrap it slowly, carefully, like something sacred. You do not mention it to your husband. You do not mention it to the doctor. You do not mark the date. You simply uncork the bottle and breathe in. And you begin again. You need more. You always need more. At first, the difference is subtle. A sluggishness that doesn't lift. A restless hum beneath the ribs even after your morning dose. A faint awareness of the time passing too slowly, too loudly. You wait an hour, it does not resolve. You take 5 more drops, the edge softens. You take 10 more the next day, then 15. The difference between 25 and 40 is not as dramatic as you thought it might be. Not dramatic at all, in fact, just necessary. The problem you tell yourself isn't the drug, it's your condition. The dosage simply no longer meets your needs. You are not abusing it, you are adjusting. The way one adjusts a shawl when the wind changes, or a corset when the stays begin to press the lungs. You do what you must. You are being sensible. You forget things. Not permanently, just briefly. Just long enough to start a sentence and lose your place. You trail off in conversation and press your hand to your forehead as though the thought escaped you in a puff of light. Your husband doesn't notice or pretends not to. You forget an appointment with the seamstress. You forget what day it is when the bills arrive. You forget for a moment how long it's been since you left the house. It's not alarming. It's just inconvenient. You keep a small notebook now. Not a diary, nothing sentimental. Just a list of things you mean to do. Notes to yourself in careful script. Letters to respond to deliveries expected. Times when the maid will be out. You read it every morning and forget it by lunch. Still, you feel better having written it down. It means you're managing things. Your hands shake more than they used to, not dramatically. Not enough to drop the cup, just enough that you pause longer at the sink. Enough that you start wearing gloves more often, even indoors. It's fashionable. It's modest. It hides the subtle tremors well. Sometimes when you've taken too much too quickly, your vision shimmers faintly at the edges. Not darkness exactly, just an odd warping of the light. Like water on a hot street, it passes. You sit down until it does. You try not to speak during these spells. You've learned that you slur slightly when you do. Once at dinner, your husband asks if you're quite well. You smile and say, "It's just the weather. It's always the weather." He nods. He does not press. You admire that about him. His ability to accept an answer regardless of its truth. The doctor notices. He doesn't say so directly, but his gaze lingers a bit too long when you hand him the bottle for inspection. The label is worn at the corners. The ink is smudged slightly from handling. He turns it over in his hand and hums softly to himself. You keep your expression neutral. He raises an eyebrow, faint, clinical, and then without comment opens his bag and produces another. You feel a flash of something. Not guilt exactly, but the memory of guilt. A reflex. It passes. You thank him and see him to the door. You begin to plan your days more carefully. You take your first dose earlier now, sometimes before the maid arrives. It helps you dress, helps you sit still, helps you move without effort. You take the second dose by mid-afternoon. The third, only if needed, if it's been a long day, if your husband has guests, if there's correspondence to answer. You tell yourself it's all very controlled. The refills come more frequently. You do not count the days between them, but you can tell by weight when the bottle is running low. You send for more without hesitation. You rotate apothecaries sometimes, just in case. One near Lincoln's Inn, one near the square, a third that knows your name but never says it aloud. No one questions the prescriptions. The handwriting is always the same. You wake once in the middle of the night with your heart racing. You're not sure why. The room is dark, the house silent. You're not sweating, not fevered, but something in you is lurching. A sense that the edges of your body are blurring or that you've been hollowed out and loosely reassembled. You sit up, you sip water, you open the drawer and reach for the bottle. You hesitate just for a moment. Then you take a measured dose and wait for the calm to return. It does. You begin to lose time, not in great spans, just in pieces. A misplaced hour here, a forgotten errand there. You look up from your letter-writing desk and realize the candles have burned halfway down. You open a novel and find your bookmark is a full chapter ahead of what you remember reading. You find yourself standing in the kitchen with no idea what you meant to do. These are small things, harmless really. You start keeping a second bottle, not because you need two, but because you fear running out. You keep one in the drawer and one on the nightstand. You rotate them to even out the wear. The older one is cloudy now, the label's starting to peel. You hold it in your hand like a charm. Your husband mentions your appetite, not critically, just in passing. He says you've grown thin. He brushes your shoulder lightly at dinner and asks if the cook has been preparing your favorites. You smile. You say yes. You excuse yourself early. He doesn't object. You still attend services. You still answer correspondence. You still remember birthdays. You are still technically functioning. You know which neighbors are pregnant, which cousins have married, which friends have moved to the country. You have not disappeared. You have merely narrowed. You remain polite, composed, appropriate, but your need grows faster than your rationing. 40 drops becomes the minimum. 50, then 60 on difficult days. You no longer feel the warmth quite the same way. The first flush of relief comes slower now, thinner. You chase it with tea. You wait longer for it to settle. You double-check that you've taken it sometimes because the feeling is so faint. You take more. You feel wrong, but you can't stop. It's not just the dosage. It's the shape of your thoughts, the rhythm of your movements. You rise too quickly in the morning and feel your knees fail beneath you for just a second. The sensation passes, but it leaves a hollow impression, as if your bones are no longer convinced of their own structure. You rest more often now. You sit in straight-back chairs and keep a shawl around your shoulders, even in fair weather. You move slowly, not out of grace, but to buy yourself time. Constipation becomes a daily obstacle. You sip prune water. You eat stewed pears. The maid begins setting a basin beside your bed again, not for illness, but for what happens when the balance tips too far in either direction. You develop little routines for managing it. Warm compresses, tonic bitters. A strange stretching motion you perform behind the screen where no one can see. Nothing works consistently. You say, nothing. The night sweats return sometime in May. You wake, soaked through, sheets clinging to your back, pillowcase damp beneath your cheek. You open the window. The air feels too thin. The sweating isn't feverish. You take your temperature twice to be sure, but it clings slick and sour and leaves you exhausted. You change your linen in the dark and go back to bed, still shivering. The next morning, you pretend it didn't happen. Your dreams shift. They used to be fragments, blurred faces, disconnected speech, places that no longer exist. Now they tighten. You dream of the same room every night, the same walls, the same closed door. It's always dusk, and someone is always just on the other side, breathing quietly through the keyhole. You wake, gasping, clutching the blanket, and immediately reach for the bottle. You do not count drops. You do not sit up. Your teeth begin to ache. It starts with the back molars. You bite into bread and feel a deep, shocking thrum beneath the surface. You stop chewing with that side. Then the other side begins to throb. Not constantly, just enough to remind you. You try clothes. You try warm rinses. You consider writing to your husband's dentist. But the idea of explaining the symptoms exhausts you. Your eyesight fades at the edges. You squint more. Reading takes longer. You blink too often. You clean your spectacles even when they're not smudged. The world takes on a slight haze. And when it clears, you feel as though you've been jerked forward in time. You look into the mirror one morning and feel a jolt of confusion. Not at the reflection itself, but at the way it seems to lag, just slightly behind you. One afternoon, you think you see something in the mirror. Just a flicker just over your left shoulder. A shadow too thin to belong to anything in the room. You turn quickly. Nothing is there. You steady yourself, smile faintly, and pretend not to notice that your mouth is trembling. You reapply your hair ribbon with fingers that feel like gloves. You do not tell anyone. Later that week, you see something in the corner of the drawing room, a darker corner than usual. You stare at it until your eyes begin to burn. You do not blink. It does not move, but you can feel it waiting. The moment you look away, it will reach for you. You light a candle and set it on the table nearby. The shadow recedes. You nod as if you've negotiated a truce. You sit with your hands folded in your lap and the bottle just beneath your palm. You try to stop, not forever, not even for long, just a day, just to see what happens. You decide not to take your morning dose. You make it through tea, then through the first hour of sunlight. By mid-morning, your skin has begun to itch. Not a rash, just a crawling, a prickling beneath the surface. You stand too quickly and feel your stomach cramp. Your knees give again. This time you catch yourself against the desk, but only just. You do not cry. You bite down hard and breathe through your nose. The maid knocks on the door. You say you're resting. Your voice sounds unfamiliar. She does not open it. You sit on the rug with your back against the bed frame and wait for the nausea to pass. It doesn't. By noon, you are curled over the basin, retching. Nothing comes up but a string of yellow bile and something that tastes like old copper. Your eyes water. Your hands cramp. You brace your forearm against your ribs and feel the sweat roll down the curve of your spine. You know what you need. You know where it is. But you sit still, stubborn, because you said you wouldn't. By early afternoon, you're shaking. Not visibly, not enough to alarm anyone, but enough that you knock your hairbrush off the table, reaching for the lamp. The sound startles you. You hiss under your breath and sit on the floor again, knees drawn up, face pressed into your nightgown. The maid knocks once more, softer this time. You do not answer. She leaves a tray outside your door. You can smell the broth going cold. You don't remember the last time you ate. You reach for the drawer. The bottle is there, cool to the touch, half full and promising. You do not hesitate. You uncork it and drink directly from the neck. The taste is sharper this way, more medicinal. You cough once, then twice. You breathe slowly. You count to 30. You wait. The shaking begins to fade. Not immediately, not completely, but the worst of it eases. The pain at the base of your skull dulls. The crawling feeling under your skin begins to quiet. You close your eyes and lie on your side, still on the floor, one arm curled under your head, the other wrapped loosely around your waist like a brace. You wake sometime later, and the window is dark. The candle is burned low. You drag yourself upright and sit on the edge of the bed, back stiff, hair loose and damp against your shoulders. You breathe through your mouth. You're too tired to stand. The bottle rests in your palm. You do not put it away. The dreams return that night. Same door, same shadow. You do not wake up screaming. You do not scream at all. In the morning, you try to dress. Your fingers fumble the hooks of your bodice. You sit down and rest halfway through fastening your stays. The laces feel tighter than usual. You loosen them and say nothing. When the maid enters, You ask for tea. She brings it and pretends not to notice that your stockings don't match. You take your dose without delay. You measure it with a slightly steadier hand than yesterday. You stir it into your tea and drink it quickly, the way one might swallow a bitter truth. You do not sit down right away. You wait to feel the warmth. You wait for the blood to slow. You wait for the world to settle. It takes longer than it used to. You add another splash, just a small one, just to catch up. The trembling begins to fade again. Your shoulders stop twitching. Your hands return to something close to stillness. You press your fingers to your temples and breathe deeply. The ache is still there, but it is softened into the familiar shape of endurance. You are forced to ask for help, not aloud, not directly, but visibly. You no longer leave your room without preparation. You eat only when pressed. You cannot fasten your stays. The maid does it for you now. Fingers uncertain against the tight, sagging laces. You avoid the mirror. You speak in short phrases, or not at all. You forget names, not of strangers, but of people you once loved. You still respond when spoken to, but it takes longer. The words reach you as if shouted down a corridor, arriving faint and slightly blurred. You are thinner, not delicately so, not in the graceful, consumptive way novels describe, but hollowed out. Your dress no longer fits at the hips, your corset slips, your wedding ring is loose. You keep it on out of habit. One morning, you wake to find a shallow bruise across your collarbone. You have no memory of how it got there. You speak to yourself now, not constantly, but audibly. The maid hears you through the door. You murmur as you sleep. You whisper answers to questions no one has asked. You offer reassurances into the quiet. Once you apologize to someone who isn't there. Your husband is the one who sends for the doctor. He does not discuss it with you. He does not ask if you want to visit. He simply arranges it the way he might arrange to have the carpets beaten or the chimney swept. It is not cruelty. It is maintenance. You are in his mind something in the house that requires attending to. He arrives briskly as always. His coat smells of cold air and paper. His hat is powdered. His shoes are clean. He does not knock. He is let in. The maid steps aside. She does not announce him. He enters the room with the confidence of someone who has visited often and learned nothing. You are sitting upright barely. You arranged yourself that way when you heard the carriage. Your arms are folded in your lap. Your ankles are crossed but not tightly. You have combed your hair. You have put on gloves. You do not remember doing these things, but they have been done. He sits across from you. He taps your knees with 2 fingers and watches the reaction. He opens your eyes wide with his thumb and stares into the whites. He shines a small lamp against your pupils. You flinch. The light feels like heat. He makes a note in a small book you don't remember him bringing. His handwriting is tight, purposeful, and unreadable from where you sit. He asks if you're sleeping. You say yes. He asks if you're eating. You say yes. He asks if you're in pain. You say no. He does not challenge your answers. He records them with a small, satisfied nod. You know what he will write in his report? You have seen the words before. Nervous strain, hysteric disturbance, female constitution, spiritual fatigue, melancholia brought on by confinement, grief retained in the blood. He says it is not uncommon that women often experience lingering sensitivities after childbirth, especially those of a quiet, introspective disposition. He does not look at you as he says this. He looks toward the window as if drawing the thought from the trees outside. He mentions the change of season. He suggests that the coming summer may bring relief. He tells you to avoid reading anything too emotionally stimulating. The doctor asks if you still require laudanum. You hesitate just briefly, just long enough that the silence becomes meaningful. You say yes. He nods again, as if he already knew. He adjusts his cuffs. He does not ask why your dosage has increased. He does not ask how often you take it. He does not ask whether it helps. He says, if it allows you rest, it's doing its work. You think of that phrase for hours afterward, doing its work, as though this state, this suspended, silent, slow dripping decay were a form of productivity. As though being quiet and compliant and steadily dissolving were proof of treatment. You feel a sudden urge to laugh. You do not. You do not have the breath for it. He closes his notebook and rises. He does not offer his hand. You do not reach for it. He calls softly for the maid. She appears instantly, like a creature summoned. He says, "You should have broth and rest. No visitors. Light reading only. A turn about the garden if possible." He does not look at you when he says this. He pauses at the door and says, almost as an afterthought, "Continue with the drops. They're doing you good." He does not wait for a response. He steps out. Morning, or maybe it's evening. There is light behind the curtains, but it is gray and unhelpful, the kind that settles over the room like dust. You're lying on top of the coverlet, half-dressed, one stocking still rolled down around your ankle. Your throat is dry. Your mouth tastes metallic. When you sit up, your hair pulls against the back of your neck, stiff with dried sweat. There is a crease in your cheek from the embroidery on the pillow, deep enough to ache when you touch it. The fire has gone out. The embers are cold. You do not remember whether it was lit at all. The tea tray is sitting on the side table. The pot is full but cold. A slice of bread, half eaten, lies on the carpet by your foot. You stare at it for a long time before realizing it is yours. You rise slowly. Your knees pop. There is a throbbing behind your left eye that pulses with each heartbeat. You pull your shawl around your shoulders and make your way to the basin. The water is tepid. There is a film of dust on its surface. Your reflection blurs when you lean over it. You blink. The movement hurts. One eye is red-streaked and wet at the corner. You press a cloth to it until the burning dulls. Then you stand again, unsure whether you were meant to be going somewhere. The note is on the writing desk. You don't remember writing it. You don't remember reading it either. It's in your hand unmistakably, though the script is looser than usual. Slanted, unguarded. Your name is written at the top of the page as if someone else had addressed it to you. Beneath that, 2 lines of sentence fragments. The first half crossed out in heavy strokes. The rest is smudged. There's something about Thursday, or Thursday's girl, or thirst. You hold the paper to the light, but it doesn't help. You check the hall. No one is there. The air outside the room is stale, but undisturbed. The maid hasn't come, or if she has, she left quickly. Your boots are still by the door. Your gloves are missing. One sits on the stairs, bowled into itself like a dropped rag. You pick it up. It's damp and warm from the radiator. You do not remember leaving it there. You check the bottle. It is not empty, but it is lighter than you expect. The level has dropped noticeably. You tip it forward and catch the scent. Sweet, sharp, chemical. Your stomach knots in anticipation before you've even tasted it. You wonder how many doses it takes to erase a day. You wonder if it's only been one day. There's a smear on your wrist. Pale, dry. A trace of something rubbed in and wiped away. You scrub it off with a cloth and do not try to guess what it was. You sit in the armchair, bottle in hand, and try to reconstruct the previous day. There is a gap where morning ought to be. No memory of tea, of footsteps, of firelight or letters. You think someone may have visited. There was a voice or two. You remember the way the floor creaked by the fireplace. Not under your weight, but someone else's. You remember a shadow crossing the curtains. You do not remember a face, only a presence. Something that stood too close, then left without a sound. You tell yourself it could have been the maid, or your husband, or the doctor, or someone you invited and forgot. The last possibility troubles you most. Your hands are unsteady. You set the bottle down. You press your palms together until the ache becomes sharp enough to confirm your own skin. You stare at the table. You consider writing again, but the pen is gone and the ink has dried in its dish. You do not want to ask for more. Later, you find a cup in the upstairs corridor. Ceramic, unglazed, not from your usual set. There is a lipstick smear on the rim. You do not wear lipstick. You sit down on the top step and hold the cup in both hands, as if it might explain itself. You think you remember laughter once sharp yours? You cannot recall what it was about. The light shifts again. It grows darker, or at least narrower. The window panes begin to rattle faintly as though a storm is making up its mind. You find your dressing gown on the floor near the bed. You do not remember undressing. You do not remember dressing either. There is something under the bed. A book face down, pages bent. You retrieve it carefully. It is a volume of sermons inside a scrap of paper with only one word, enough. You do not know if it was meant as a note or a label. You set it on the nightstand and forget it there. Eventually, you drink. Not with the usual ritual. No tea, no water, no counting. You open the bottle and tip it straight to your lips. The taste is worse this way, thicker. It coats your teeth. It bites the back of your throat before spreading into the familiar warmth. You do not chase it with anything. You do not wait for the edge to smooth. You lie down on the rug beside the bed, too tired to climb in and close your eyes. The room bends slightly at the corners. The floor tilts once, then again. The sensation is familiar now, like walking across a boat's deck in heavy shoes. You do not mind it. You do not resist. The dreams, when they come, are heavier than usual. They do not flicker or shift. They hold you in one place, one long corridor with too many closed doors. You knock at each in turn, but no one answers. You open one door and find your own reflection. She is younger. She is waiting. A few days pass. You're outside briefly. It isn't planned. The morning begins in the usual way, half waking, swallowing, blinking through a thick and weightless fog. But when you reach for the drawer, the bottle isn't there. You check the nightstand, the writing desk, the cabinet under the basin. Nothing. You remember finishing it the night before, or maybe the night before that. You meant to send for more. You meant to ration it more carefully, but you didn't, and now it's gone. At first, you tell yourself it's an opportunity, a pause, a chance to recalibrate. You feel ill, but not unbearable. You take a hot cloth to your eyes, a glass of cold water to your throat. The headache is already blooming behind your temples, but still you stand. You pull on your stays awkwardly. You dress. You decide that a walk might clear the feeling. You leave a note for the maid. Just a single line. Gone out for air. Your handwriting wavers. You fold the paper in half and leave it on the chair. The street is quieter than you expected, pale, unmoving. The skies blank white. The buildings are rigid and unsympathetic. You wrap your shawl tighter around your shoulders and begin walking toward the square. The air is crisp, brisk even. Your shoes feel wrong on the cobblestones, heavy at the toe, unsteady at the heel. You adjust your pace. You lift your chin. You tell yourself you're simply out of practice. The sunlight is too bright, not warm, just intrusive. It glances off window panes and dazzles at odd angles. You keep to the shaded side of the street, but even there, your vision pulses faintly at the edges. You take a few deep breaths. You keep walking. You pass 2 shops without looking in. You think someone may have nodded to you, but you aren't sure. And by the time you turn your head, they've gone. Your arms feel strange, like they belong to someone else. Too long, too far from your shoulders. You clench your fists to keep them close, but it doesn't help. You cross your arms and hold your elbows instead. You hope it looks intentional. A dog barks suddenly from an open window above. You flinch. The sound splits something open in your head. A man across the road glances over. Puzzled, you smile faintly, as if to acknowledge a shared absurdity and keep walking. You miss the edge of the curbstone and stumble slightly. You recover quickly. You do not stop. The marketplace is ahead. You hear it before you see it. The creak of wheels, the indistinct murmur of voices, the cough of someone lifting sacks of coal. Your hands begin to sweat inside your gloves. You blink, and for a moment, the street tilts. You reach for the wall and steady yourself, then pretend to fix your shawl. You should turn around, but you keep going. The stalls come into view. Baskets of pale vegetables, tins of dried fish, small rolls of linen swaddled in wax paper. You step into the open square. The noise folds in around you, not loud, but too layered, too human. Someone brushes past your shoulder. You step back. A child laughs nearby, high and sharp. It cuts into you like a pin. You feel yourself coming apart, and it's happening far too gently. There is no panic, no drama, no lurching collapse, just a slow disconnection, as though your mind has stepped a few inches to the left of your body and is now watching with mild interest as your knees fail. You go down carefully, almost politely, as if excusing yourself from a conversation. You crouch first, then lower yourself to the ground. You think briefly that this is not the worst place to rest. You hear someone shout, then someone else laugh, then feet, then nothing. When you wake, you're not outside. You're in your own bed, and it's late or early. The window is closed. The lamp has been extinguished. Your clothes have been changed, but your underthings are still damp with sweat. Your hair has been brushed, but not well. There's a knot behind your ear, tight enough to tug when you shift on the pillow. You lie very still and listen. The house is quiet. The maid must be asleep. You cannot hear your husband's movements, though that means very little. He is light-footed and often withdrawn. You blink at the ceiling and try to trace the last thing you remember. The street, the stalls, the child's voice, and then the ground. Someone must have helped you. Someone must have recognized you or brought you here out of duty. But you cannot remember who. You try to imagine what you looked like, sitting in the middle of the square, unable to speak. You picture your mouth open, your shawl slipping from one shoulder, your gloves uneven. You imagine your eyes wide but slow to blink. You imagine what your face must look like when the world tilts. You hope it looked like fainting. You hope it looked respectable. You check your arms for bruises. There are none. Someone carried you carefully. Someone knew how to hold a body without bending it too far. You check your hair. A few pins are missing. You wonder if they were left behind. You wonder if anyone recognized them. You reach for the drawer, hand trembling, already knowing it will be full. There's a new bottle inside, still wrapped. The paper is cleaner than usual. You untie the string slowly, fingers shaking, then place the wrapping in the waste bin beneath the desk. The bottle is cold and familiar in your hand. You hold it for a long moment before opening it. You hesitate, not out of guilt, but confusion. You do not know whether you took too little or too much, whether the collapse was withdrawal or overdose, whether the blankness was the result of absence or excess. You have no frame of reference anymore. No marker for what is normal. You take a dose anyway. It doesn't matter what the cause was, only the remedy. The trembling softens. Your vision steadies. You lie back on the bed and breathe as evenly as you can. Your teeth hurt. Your legs are sore. Your hands feel brittle. But the ache inside your ribs has retreated by a fraction. And that is enough. In the morning, your husband appears in the doorway. He doesn't say much, just asks if you're feeling more like yourself. You nod. He doesn't ask what happened. He doesn't mention the street. You don't know whether that's out of courtesy or embarrassment. You don't ask who brought you home. You do not want to know. The maid is quieter than usual. She brings tea and doesn't meet your eyes. There is a faint mark on her sleeve as though someone grabbed it in haste. You think of asking her gently, offhandedly if she saw you yesterday, but you don't. You sit by the fire and sip your tea. You plan to write a letter, but forget the name. You pick up a book and find the page unreadable. The paper curls slightly in your hand. You set it down again. Outside, the wind shifts. Someone coughs in the alley behind the garden wall. A carriage rolls past without slowing. The light from the window changes as the clouds pull open. You blink at the brightness, then pull the curtain closed with a steady hand. You lie down again and say nothing. The money begins to run out. Not household money, not truly. There is always enough for eggs, meat, coal, and soap and everyday things. But your allowance from your husband arrives every Thursday in the same quiet way it always has. 2 sovereigns in a fold of paper left discreetly in the drawer beneath your underthings. Your husband never mentions it. He assumes it is enough. For small household items, for ribbon or embroidery floss, for whatever gentle pleasures are expected to occupy a woman in your condition. You thank him when you remember. He nods as though it was never in doubt. Neither of you pretends it is for medicine. Medicine is what the doctor provides. You ration the coins with care at first. 1 for the apothecary, 1 for appearances. There are still days when you make a show of shopping, when you stroll down Bedford Row in a borrowed hat, pause at the haberdashery's window, and finger the frayed edge of your shawl as if deciding whether it might be worth mending. You pass other women with baskets and children in tow. You nod at familiar faces. You smile too long at people who do not greet you back. Then you circle back behind the square to the side alley, where the boy from the apothecary sometimes loiters pretending to sweep. He doesn't ask questions anymore. He takes the coin and gives you the bottle. You do not meet his eyes. Sometimes he counts the change and slips you a peppermint sweet, as if to soften the transaction. You pocket it without a word. He is young enough to think it kind. You are no longer young enough to take offense. The trouble begins when your Thursday money is gone by Tuesday. Not every week, just the difficult ones. The ones when your skin feels too tight and the neighbor's voices scratch at your skull and you cannot bear the sound of a spoon against a cup without shaking. You try to make it stretch, but the bottle grows lighter, faster now. 40 drops, sometimes more. Once in a rush, you drink it straight. You feel ill for hours, then better, then worse again. The line between relief and need is gone. It's all need now. You do not ask your husband for more. You consider it once. You practice the words in your head. Something about new gloves or a pattern book or a small charity collection for the curate's wife. But you hear your own voice in your imagination, and it sounds unconvincing, greedy, too polished. You know, he would give you the money if you asked. That is not the problem. The problem is that he might ask why, that he might open the cabinet, that he might begin to keep count, and then the silence that has kept you safe would crack open something much harder to bear. So, you manage. You borrow against yourself. You skip breakfast. You dismiss the laundress 1 week early and tell her you're feeling too faint for company. You take a brooch, not one of great value, but one your mother gave you, and wrap it in soft paper. You bring it to a pawnbroker on Theo's Road, whose office smells of lard and coal and something faintly chemical. You place it on the counter and smile as if you're simply clearing space in your drawer. The man doesn't smile back. He gives you enough for 2 bottles, no questions asked. You walk home with a paper parcel clutched in your coat, and the strange sense that your breath has grown thinner, as if you've hollowed yourself out just enough to be weightless. When the doctor returns, he notices nothing, or at least he says nothing. He sits in the chair beside your bed and asks the usual 3 questions. You answer them with the same practiced half-truths. Not quite. Some no, he nods. You wonder if he stopped listening. You wonder if he ever did. You smile at him, not out of warmth, but out of habit. And he leaves you with a fresh label folded in his satchel. The maid who once knocked now hovers. She speaks less, though you sense her watching. Once you catch her glancing at your nightstand, at the bottles arranged too neatly, you make a show of straightening your pillow and coughing lightly. She averts her eyes. You think she may know. You think she may tell. You consider hiding the bottles elsewhere. You try the drawer, then the wardrobe, then behind a stack of hymnals you haven't opened in months. But it doesn't help. You always find them again, and there are more than you realized. You begin to suspect theft. The tincture disappears faster than you remember taking it. The tea tastes weaker. The relief comes later. You check the spoons, the dosage. You count the drops once, twice, and still the bottle empties too quickly. You accuse the maid in your head, then the boy from the apothecary. Then you realize the truth. It's you. You are the thief. You're the one who forgets, who double doses, who wakes up mid-conversation and does not remember if you've taken it already. You're the one who says just a little more and then just to sleep and then just to stop shaking until there is nothing left to explain. You do not cry when you realize it. You just lie very still and let the knowledge pass through you like smoke. There is nothing to be done about it now. On Thursday, your allowance arrives late. Your husband leaves it on the table instead of in the drawer. He does not mention the change. You pretend not to notice. You excuse yourself early and step into the hall to collect your coat. It has been raining. You carry the coins in your glove so they won't clink. The boy isn't outside today. You walk 2 streets farther than usual toward a different alley, a different shop. The clerk there is older, less friendly. He eyes you with the kind of politeness reserved for women who appear more fragile than fashionable. You leave with another bottle, then another, then a third, just in case. The coins are gone before dusk. That night, you climb into bed with a book you cannot read. You hold it open, staring at the words, until your vision doubles. Your husband asks something about the weather. You nod. You're too tired to make sense of the question. You take another dose before sleep. Not too much, not quite. Just enough to keep the edges soft. In the morning, you sell your embroidery scissors. The nice ones, with a little silver bird for a handle. You haven't used them in months, but your hands shake a little as you pass them to the man behind the counter. He does not ask why. Eventually, you tell yourself it is time to stop. Not because you feel ready, but because you can feel the strain behind your eyes like a wire pulled taut. The bottle is nearly empty. Your weekly allowance has already gone toward the last refill, and there's nothing else in the jewelry box. But a broken clasp and a cameo pendant with no chain. You consider going back to the pawnbroker, but even you know that showing up twice in 1 week would raise questions. And questions are a luxury you can't afford. You've lied already this month. To the maid, to the assistant at the apothecary, to yourself. You promised you'd make the last bottle last. You didn't. And now it's run dry with 4 full days left until your next envelope appears on the mantel. You try to prepare. You light the fire early, even though it's warm for April. You wet a cloth and fold it against your forehead like you've seen sickly women do in paintings. You sit very still. You take lemon water slowly, deliberately, as if ritual might make it more effective. You tell yourself it's just a matter of endurance. One day, then another, then the next. You can bear things. You have done it before. You remind yourself that childbirth lasted longer, that pain was real and it ended. This one can too. You whisper this to yourself over and over, as if it were a spell. By evening, the cold has begun to sink into your bones. Not outside. Inside, the kind of cold that can't be solved with bricks or blankets. You pull the dressing gown tighter, the sweat beads at the back of your neck despite the chill. You lie on your side to keep the room from spinning. The ceiling has gone waxy and pink as if the sun had melted through it. The maid knocks once and receives no answer. She leaves a tray on the landing and disappears. You hear the distant clink of porcelain and the squeak of shoes. You think about calling out to her, but your voice feels lodged behind your ribs. By midnight, the cramps have begun. Your hands curl inward without your permission. Your toes flex until the skin beneath your nails feels raw. Your stomach clenches in waves that seem to defy the passage of time. You want to vomit, but there is nothing left. Only bile, yellow, bitter, flecked with traces of tea. You spit into the basin and wipe your mouth with the sleeve of your nightdress. You smell wrong, acrid, damp, like something gone off in the Sunday. You consider that you might die. You consider that it wouldn't be much of a surprise. Sleep comes in fragments, an hour, maybe 2, broken by shivers that start in your spine and rattle your teeth. You close your eyes and see pulsing lights, patterns you don't recognize, threads, maybe eyes, a spinning wheel without a spindle. You open them, and the dark seems worse, thick, viscous, humming faintly with things you cannot name. You think about calling for your husband, about telling him everything, but the thought of his expression, the bewilderment, the shame, the sense that you have failed at something no one ever asked you to do is worse than the silence. So you say nothing. The second day is worse. The cold becomes a fever. You sweat through your sheets and wake up shaking. The taste in your mouth is metallic. The basin holds more yellow bile. You lose track of time. The light outside your window changes too fast or not at all. You begin to forget how long you've been lying here. The pain in your limbs grows more diffuse, less like pain and more like buzzing. You see insects crawling across the inside of your wrist. When you brush them away, they vanish. You do not scream. Not yet. You hear voices. Not clearly. Just the idea of voices. Your name, perhaps. A man's laughter. A woman whispering something urgent. You press your hands to your ears, but the sound blooms inward instead of retreating. You look into the mirror across the room and see your reflection tilt its head before you do. You freeze. The air sharpens. You blink. It returns to normal. You turn the mirror to face the wall. You begin to think that something is under the bed. You haven't looked directly. You don't need to. You can feel it. The tug in the air. The pressure near your ankles. The sense that something is waiting for you to swing your feet to the floor. It breathes in long, slow pulses. You tell yourself it isn't real. But that only works when you're not looking at the gap beneath the frame. At some point, you hear a sound you cannot explain. A scrape like metal on stone, followed by something soft, like silk, dragging through water. You sit up too fast, and the world shifts. Your vision doubles. Your head pounds. You crawl to the edge of the bed. Slow, deliberate breath shallow. You hold on to the post and look down. Nothing. You laugh. It cracks in your throat. A sound halfway between relief and surrender. You ease back onto the pillows and try to drink water. Most of it spills down your chin. You reach for a cloth and knock something off the nightstand. A teacup maybe. It shatters. You don't move to clean it. You stare at the pieces on the floor until your eyes blur. That night, the dreams come back. Not dreams, not exactly. They feel too sharp for dreams. Your fingers sink into bed sheets that turn to river mud. Your mouth fills with pins. You hear your mother calling your name from a hallway that no longer exists. When you wake, you aren't sure if you screamed, but your throat is raw. Eventually, you think, perhaps the worst is over. The fever is broken. Your hands are steadier. Your eyes don't shake quite so much when you try to read. You sit up. The sky's dull gray. You tell yourself you've done it. You've passed through. There's something faintly victorious in the thought. Then the light shifts just slightly, and you see it in the corner, or near the mirror, or crouched just past the doorframe. You do not remember what it looks like, only how it made you feel, like you were being seen too closely, like your name was being peeled from your skin, like time had stopped obeying its own rules and left you behind in a version of the room that wasn't quite yours. You scream. You scream hard enough that your throat goes hoarse. You scream again and hear footsteps. Doors open. The maid's voice, then silence. The thing is gone. You lie back. You reach for the bottle. There are only a few drops left. You uncork it, tilt it into your mouth, and hold your breath to keep from gagging. The taste is wrong. Burnt. Bitter. But you swallow anyway. It's not enough. Not even close. You cry quietly, the way one does when no one is coming. You close your eyes and wait for the trembling to fade. It doesn't. So you reach for the bottle again and begin scraping the inside with a spoon. The days lose their edges. You are not sure when this started. There is no moment you can point to and say, that was the last time I was myself. If there even is a self left. The face in the mirror shifts when you look at it. Sometimes she smiles, sometimes she scowls. Sometimes her lips move before yours do. You stop looking altogether. You lie curled beneath the covers, not sleeping, but not quite waking either. Your limbs are stiff and cold. Your fingers twitch, but you can no longer write. You tried a letter, perhaps an apology, but the pen wouldn't behave, and the words slipped away. You managed a few lines, disjointed, half-spelled. You can't remember what they said. You tore it up. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe it's still somewhere on the floor, folded between your petticoats, and the night soil pale, smudged with ink and something darker. You do not eat unless it's placed in your hand. Sometimes you chew, sometimes you don't. Once you tried to drink from the urn and missed your mouth entirely. You sat in soaked linens for hours before noticing the chill. The maid avoids your door now. She leaves trays at odd angles, never knocks. Once she opened the door and looked inside, you heard her take a breath, then quickly retreat. The door clicked shut again. You were too slow to speak, or you forgot the words. Your husband has stopped speaking in full sentences. You hear his footsteps in the hall, then the retreating creak of the stairs. He leaves a folded note with your allowance on the mantelpiece. He used to tuck it into your hand. Now he doesn't cross the room. Sometimes you forget his name. The smell of the room is changed. Not just sour linens and spilled tincture. Something else. Something like earth. Like a church cellar in the rain. You've opened the window twice, then forgot and closed it again. The air inside presses inward, damp and heavy like breath you didn't take. You see people who aren't there. Sometimes they sit at the end of the bed. Sometimes they stand near the window and look out as if waiting for something. One of them wore your mother's shawl. Another had your face. You spoke to one for nearly an hour before realizing she hadn't blinked once. You tried to leave once, pulled on your cloak over your nightdress, and made it to the stairs before your knees buckled. You crawled 2 steps down before giving up. The maid found you there hours later and guided you back like a half-drunk guest at a bad party. She said nothing, just wiped the blood from your lip with the hem of her apron and shut the door behind you. The next morning, if it was morning, you found yourself on the floor again. Your shoulder ached. You had a bruise you don't remember earning. The furniture had moved, or you had. You don't know which. The mirror had cracked. One jagged line from corner to corner. You weren't surprised. When you sleep, your dreams are crowded. Faces too close. Mouths moving without sound. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they scream. You once woke up gagging on your own fist. Another time you found your fingernails torn and bleeding. The bedsheet streaked with something that smelled like rust. The bottle is always empty, no matter how recently you swear you bought one. You no longer measure doses. You simply pour what's left and hope. You've lost the habit of rationing, of pretending you can stop. That pretense was from another life. Your skin feels wrong, too loose in some places, too tight in others. You scratch at your arms and thighs until you leave welts. The backs of your hands are pale and veiny, and you don't remember when they began to look like that. You stop looking at them. You stop looking at anything. You try to recall your sister's face and get only hair. You try to remember your wedding night and get only linen. You try to recite a psalm and forget the ending. You forget how to read a clock. You ask the mirror what day it is and laugh at your own voice. You begin to hear music from beneath the floorboards. A single violin, slightly out of tune. Then footsteps. Then nothing. You hold your breath and the sound returns. It continues whether your ears are open or closed. It's worse when the house is quiet. You press your head against the mattress and wait for it to end. It never does. There are days you do not move at all. You wake in the same position you fell asleep. Your limbs feel like wood. You stare at the ceiling and count the cracks in the plaster. You blink slowly. You breathe like it's a task to be done carefully. You wonder if you've already died and no one noticed. You consider asking someone. You decide not to. The letter you once meant to write is gone. You assume you threw it away. You assume you meant well. The whispering returns more frequent now. It doesn't bother you. Sometimes it says your name. Sometimes it says things you once said. A version of your voice. A second behind your thoughts. Once, it asked you to open the door. You told it you couldn't. Not because it was locked, but because you weren't sure there was a door anymore. You no longer care who sees you. You do not draw the curtains. You do not change your clothes. The basin is full. The chamber pot overflows. A moth lives in the folds of your bedsheet. You once tried to crush it. Then you forgot what you were doing. Someone knocks. Not the maid, not your husband. Someone heavier with boots. They knock twice, then open the door without waiting. You don't lift your head. You don't speak. You're not sure your mouth still works. They walk slowly into the room. The floor creaks beneath them. They pause. "She's here," says a man's voice. A second voice, nasal and annoyed, replies, "We thought she'd gone already." You try to ask who they are. You try to ask what they mean. But your tongue is heavy. The words don't come. Your jaw trembles. Your body is soaked in cold sweat. One arm is pinned beneath you, the other curled awkwardly against your chest. One of them approaches the bed. He leans close enough for you to see the shadow of stubble on his chin. He smells like pipe smoke and damp wool. He reaches out, touches your wrist, then pulls back with a frown. "Still warm," he says. "Barely." You blink. You try to say you're awake. That you understand. That you're still here. But the light shifts again, and you close your eyes against it. Just for a moment. Just until they stop talking. Just until the trembling fades. Your husband decides you shouldn't be here anymore. He doesn't say it aloud. Not to you. He says it to the doctor softly while you're in the next room. Sitting by the window with your shawl around your shoulders and your eyes half focused on the wind rattling the shutters. You can hear the conversation, not the words, their tones, the slow cadence, the mutual agreement that something must be done, something kind, something firm. You understand the shape of it even if you don't catch the details. You are not invited to clarify. You are not asked to weigh in. You are simply the subject around which the decision is shaped, like dough being pressed into a mold. Later, the doctor comes to you as if it were his idea. He wears his usual expression, polite, neutral, untroubled, and places a hand briefly on your shoulder. "We think," he says, "that some time away may help you recover properly. Somewhere peaceful, somewhere restful." He uses words like tranquility, care, and treatment. You nod without fully knowing why. The words don't sound false, but they don't sound true either. They're carefully selected not to provoke a reaction. He smiles when you nod. You don't remember what your face is doing. You just know it's easier not to argue. The maid begins packing your things the next day. She does it while you nap, or at least while your eyes are closed. You hear the drawers slide open, the gentle folding of linen, the clink of hairpins and brooches being placed in a small case you haven't touched in months. No one packs the bottle. That has been quietly removed already without ceremony or discussion. You aren't sure when. Perhaps yesterday. Perhaps the day before. You don't ask. Your mouth is dry and your voice doesn't quite belong to you at the moment. When you open your eyes, your dresses are folded. Your nightgown is still on you, but the rest of your life has been tucked neatly away. You hear someone whisper something in the hallway. The maid replies with something even softer than silence. You're no longer a woman to be consulted, only one to be managed. That afternoon, a hired cab arrives. You hear it before you see it. The low clatter of hooves on wet stone. The groan of the brake as the driver steps down. You are guided into your coat. Someone hands you gloves. Your husband waits in the front hallway. Posture straight, face unreadable. He holds your arm as you descend the steps. Not tightly, not gently, just enough to make sure you reach the cab. The door is opened for you. The seat is worn, but not uncomfortable. You sit. He does not follow. "I'll come on the weekend," he says, and then corrects himself. "I'll write first." You nod again because you're supposed to nod. He closes the door. The latch clicks. The driver does not look at you. He climbs back onto his bench, lifts the reins, and the cab begins to move. You watch the house disappear through the fogged window. The glass blurs the edges. The familiar becomes shapeless. Even the shutters are always rattling. Make no sound. It's as if they've already replaced you. Or perhaps they never noticed you were still there. You fold your hands in your lap and stare at your reflection in the window. It wavers. Too pale, too indistinct. You look like someone in a dream someone else is having. London passes slowly. You don't know where you're going, only that it takes some time to get there. Long enough to wonder if you're being taken to a place with a gate. Long enough to wonder if they'll remember your name. You try to count the turns, the corners, the shops, the chimneys, but everything blends. A bakery, then a canal, then a dog barking at a child. It doesn't matter. None of it touches you. The cab finally slows on a street you do not recognize. The buildings are gray and square. Trees without leaves rise from small, neat yards. There are no signs, no posted names, just a brick wall and a tall gate with a man waiting beside it, hat in hand. The driver says something to him. The man nods and opens the gate. The cab rolls through. The building is larger than you expected. Not grand, but imposing, clean, austere. Ivy climbs one side, leafless and clinging. There are iron grates on the lower windows. Not bars exactly, just something to discourage, disturbance. A nurse steps outside before the cab fully stops. She's in gray, hair tucked neatly, hands clasped. When she opens the door, she smiles. It is the kind of smile given to children on long journeys, distant and well-practiced. "Mrs. L," she says. You nod. You cannot think of anything else to do. She reaches for your hand, but does not take it unless you offer. You don't. She waits a beat, then adjusts her apron and gestures for you to follow. The door is already open. Inside, the air smells like damp wool and lavender. The floors are waxed. The light is soft, filtered through heavy curtains. A fireplace flickers in one of the side rooms. You catch a glimpse of another woman sitting in a padded chair by the hearth, staring into the flame with her hands folded in her lap like a wax figure. A nurse leans to whisper in her ear, and she blinks once. Not startled, not present either, just blinking, just existing. You are shown to a room. It is small, neat, and very clean. The windows are high and narrow. The curtains are pale. There is a bed with turned legs and crisp linen. A single framed picture hangs above it. A pastoral scene with sheep. Your trunk is already here. You don't remember who carried it. The nurse tells you there will be tea in an hour. She says your physician will visit soon to discuss your treatment. She says someone will sit with you through the night, just for the first few evenings. You nod. She smiles again. The same careful smile, and leaves, closing the door behind her with a soft click. You are alone, for the first time in days, perhaps weeks. There is no sound, no maid rustling, no paper crackling, no boots in the hallway, just the ticking of the clock and the faint creak of the wind against the eaves. You sit on the edge of the bed and look at your hands. They do not feel like yours. Your name is still yours, you think, but you haven't heard it spoken kindly in some time. You lie down without undressing. The blanket smells like starch and something else you can't quite place. There is a vase with a single flower on the table beside the bed. White petals wide, already browning at the edges. You stare at it until your eyes blur. No one has locked the door, but it wouldn't matter if they did. You do not leave. The first week passes in a blur of unfamiliar linens and hushed voices. You are told the building is called a rest home, that you are here to recover, that many women of means spend a few weeks away from the pressures of the city. The nurse who says this has a voice like warm milk and eyes that never settle on yours. You try to ask how long you'll be staying, but the question gets lost in the hallway before it reaches anyone who might answer it. No one says the word asylum. No one has to. The curtains in your room are sewn shut. You wake at odd hours, unsure if it's dawn or dusk. Meals arrive and vanish on trays you don't remember hearing. Your bottle is gone. You ask for it only once. The nurse tilts her head. Her expression trained somewhere between pity and correction. That's not part of the new regimen, she says. You nod. You lie back down. The ceiling tiles look like bones. At first, you imagine you'll be sent home soon. You imagine your husband will visit, that he will take your hand and say, "It's all been a misunderstanding." You prepare yourself to be grateful. You practice how you'll thank him. You try to recall the names of your neighbors. You rehearse small talk about the weather and church and who's come to money and who hasn't. But the days roll on, soft-edged and identical, and no one comes. The other women on your ward are pale and quiet. They sit in corners with knitting they never finish. They walk in slow loops through the garden, clutching books with the same few pages dog-eared. Some speak to no one. Others speak to things that aren't there. You hear murmurs at night, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in rhyme, and sometimes in words that make no sense at all. You do not speak much. When you do, it feels rehearsed. Phrases borrowed from the nurse's handbook. Yes, thank you. And a little tired today. You don't ask how long you've been here. Time folds in on itself. The dresses change. The food worsens. The handwriting on the charts becomes more rushed. One year, a girl arrives with her hair shorn to the scalp and her wrists bandaged. She doesn't speak. You try to speak to her. She just stares at your collar as if it reminds her of something. She's gone by spring. You never learn her name. The nurses change. New ones arrive with polished boots and shorter hemlines. They carry different pills. Some of them smile too much. Others never smile at all. One uses your first name when she speaks to you, and it takes you several weeks to remember that it's yours. There is talk of electric treatment. You're not selected for it. You're not selected for much. You have become one of the easier ones. You eat what's given, sleep when asked, and cause no interruptions. That is enough. Sometimes the pain returns. Not the same pain, only something softer, like a shadow of it. It creeps through your joints and your stomach and your chest, never quite enough to scream about. They give you warm compresses, a new tonic, a chalky lozenge that sticks to your teeth. You take them all without question. They do not help. You do not care. Your room changes once from the east corridor to the north. The wallpaper is the same. So is the bed. The view is slightly different. Fewer trees, more chimneys. You think you see snow one winter, but the windows are too fogged to be sure. You try not to look too long. The glass gives you headaches. It reflects a face you don't remember acquiring. On your 35th birthday, a nurse brings a biscuit with a candle in it. You blow it out. She claps gently. You do not cry. You have not worn proper shoes in years. You do not miss them. Your feet have softened. Your hands calloused from blankets and peeling wallpaper and fingernails, dug into wooden arms of chairs. When you try to hum a tune, it comes out wrong. You forget the notes halfway through and trail off hoping no one heard. No one ever does. Once someone calls your name down the corridor, the old one, your maiden one, you turn heart hammering, but it's a mistake. The girl they meant is gone by morning. The nurses begin writing notes in red pencil instead of black. You notice this, but say nothing. A new doctor joins the rounds. He doesn't look at you when he speaks. He says you're stable. He says you require continued rest. He says your case is a matter of quiet maintenance. You nod. You have become easy to manage. One spring, your body fails you. There is no grand moment, No gasp or cry, just a slow dimming. You sleep through most of it. You wake once with a terrible thirst and cannot lift your arms. You watch the sun on the wall and think of nothing. It is peaceful, if empty. You die in bed on a Tuesday, but what they guess is 0 inches the morning. A nurse finds you an hour later. She notes the time. She closes your eyes. She writes your name into the register and moves on to the next ward. There is no funeral. The hospital has a process. A carriage comes the next afternoon. The driver does not ask who you were. He doesn't need to. A slip of paper travels with your body. It bears your name, your age, and the word exhaustion. No one contests it. Your husband is notified. He receives the letter at his office and folds it neatly before placing it in a drawer. He does not speak of it at dinner. He remarries 2 years later. A quiet woman. Your belongings are boxed and stored in a shed behind the rest home. Most are discarded the following year. No one remembers your voice. No one mentions your favorite song. Your name appears on no plaque, no parish record, no memorial. You are survived only by a ledger entry and a faint rust stain on the edge of a hospital bed. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not of healing, but of a woman quietly folded out of her own life until nothing remained but a name on a drawer. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next.